Hello everybody, it's Kim. Today I'm going to show you kind of how I make an enriched bread. Now, I'm doing this no spend pantry challenge. So part of it's to use up things and part of it's just to add a little extra nutrition. It does make it a little bit denser, but it's really good and it's good for you. So first I start out with some water. There's probably about 3/4 of a cup. And I have my yeast in here, 1.5 teaspoons because I use a bulk yeast. And then I put 2 teaspoons of sugar to help activate that yeast. To this, I'm going to be adding an egg. Now, normally I would put 1 or 2. That one's huge. My girls just laid it and it's absolutely huge. I have one that lays like a super jumbo egg. I'm going to be melting a little bit, just a couple tablespoons of butter. I grind up some oats to put in there. Adds a little extra nutrition and flavor. I'm going to be using some leftover mashed potatoes. There's not a lot there, but I don't waste anything. And then I'm going to be adding about 1/4 cup of the malto-meal farina, what's it called? Cream of wheat. And then the rest will be the flour. So it makes it a little denser. It's a little bit, I don't want to call it difficult to work with. You just got to let it rise a little bit better. A little bit longer, and then you get, I think I'm going to turn it into some dinner rolls for dinner tonight. But I just wanted to show you another way that you can use up a few things, like, for example, the potatoes, the farina, which I don't care for, but you know what? It's wheat. It works. Make a little better with some oats, and then one of my jumbo eggs. So after I mix it up for a little bit, I'm going to grind these up. You can see they're in my grinder. I'm going to add the farina to that when I grind it. And then I'll show you what the dough looks like. Anybody freaking out, I washed my egg really well. I wash them right before I use them because they last a lot longer. So don't worry, it wasn't a dirty egg I cracked into my bread. Okay, in case anybody wants an actual recipe, I'm going to tell you, I don't use a recipe. I use a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But I did measure out. I took 1/2 cup of the oats and I ground them, 1/4 cup of the farina. There's 2 tablespoons of melted butter, that 1 jumbo egg, and 3/4 of a cup of water, and then it's about 1/4 cup of mashed potatoes. So far I have in here 1 cup of flour. That's where you cannot do exact measurements, and that's with your flour. It's going to depend on a lot of things, what the humidity is. It's going to depend on how large your egg is, if you want to put 1 or 2. So it's going to take between 2 to 2.5 cups, and you want it to make a sticky dough. So once I get there, I also put about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I don't like a lot of salt, but a little bit of salt does help. So once I make a dough with this, I'll show it to you. You want it to be slightly tacky when you touch it. So you didn't add too much stuff, too much flour, because then you get really dry bread. So far that's what I have in here, and I'll let you know how much I'm going to actually measure the flour for you this time, so I'll be able to let you know about what I put in here. This is 1.5 cups of flour, and you can see it's starting to pull more flour off the side. I'm starting to develop some of the gluten. You can see this hanging down here. As you're mixing it, you'll see it kind of make these like elastic like threads that pull off the side of the bowls. And at this stage, I work it for 3 or 4 minutes to start developing some of that gluten, because once you add the rest, it's hard on the mixer to, let it go for another 5 or 10 minutes. So I start developing the gluten now, and then I'll do a little bit more after. So I'm going to measure out another 1/2 cup. I don't know if I'm going to use it all, so I put in that sparingly, like, half of that at a time until I decide whether I need it all or not. You can see it starting to form a dough. I have 2 cups of flour in here. The last addition is going to be literally a tablespoon at a time until I know where it needs to be. It's still a little bit too runny. You can see it's still stuck on the bowl. I'm going to add it just until it comes off the sides of the bowl and there's nothing stuck on the bottom. You want to do this slow so you do not add too much flour. I cannot tell you how important that is, not to add too much flour, or you will get a very dense bread. This was a heaping tablespoon. You can see it starting to pull away from the sides, but there's still some stuck to the bottom. and it's still a little loose because it's falling apart. Now is where you really 1 tablespoon at a time, and I'll come back and tell you what I put in there and what it should look like. Right, you can see there's just a small bit stuck to the bottom. Don't add any more flour here. Let the mixer knead the dough for 4 to 5 minutes. It will either loosen up where you need to add some more flour, or it'll tighten up and you won't need to add any more. So this is where you just gotta let the machine do some work. You can knead it by hand if that's the way you do it. Try not to add too much flour, just enough to keep it from sticking. And then we'll see after 3 or 4 minutes how this looks. We have a nice silky bread. Now let me show you. Some people don't understand what I mean tacky. Stick your finger on the bread. This is a little bit too tacky. I want to add just a little bit more flour. You want it to stick to your finger but pull off as you pull it away. And it's kind of loose and it's still kind of stuck to the bottom. So it's been kneading for about 3 minutes. I'm going to add another tablespoon here and let it knead again. All right, you can see the difference that 1 tablespoon makes. Okay, look at it's still sticky, but I can pull my finger away a little bit easier. You can add a little bit more flour here, but I'm going to let it go. It's not, I could pull my finger away. It's still a little sticky. Once I start forming them into rolls, you're going to need a little bit of flour on your hands anyway, so don't add too much here. Now it has to go, get covered up, go in a warm place to rise. It'll take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. You want it to double in size. In about 40 minutes, my dough has doubled in size. You can see it remains a nice dent in there. It's still soft. I'm going to dump this out onto a floured counter. I'm going to turn them into rolls, and then I'm going to put them in my cast iron pan, let them rise one more time, brush them with butter, and bake. And then we will see how wonderful and delicious they turned out. To rise between 30 and 45 minutes. Always start at the lowest point and then get ready to bake them. All right, it was a half an hour. My rolls have almost doubled in size again, so I'm going to brush them with some butter. Now, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to use these for, but say if I was making rolls to go with a pasta dinner, I could add some beautiful herbs on top. You know, some rosemary, some thyme, oregano. You could put some sesame seeds on them, Parmesan cheese, whatever you really like can go on top of the rolls just to add a little something extra to them. I'm going to leave them plain because I can always make what's called a compound butter, which is basically softened butter, and you add, you know, stuff to it, and then you can spread it on the inside. But these are going to go in the oven. I start at 20 minutes. They're probably going to need longer. I normally bake a lot of bread. I'm not really a big roll maker, but I wanted to make some dinner rolls because I think I'm going to make some homemade soup tonight, and I thought that would go good with them. So anyway, I'm going to bake these until they're nice and golden and done, and then they'll be ready to go, and I'll show you a picture of them when we're done. As you can see, they're fresh out of the oven. It filled up my great big cast iron skillet, brushed a little bit more butter on top when they came out, and now we have some beautiful enriched dinner rolls for dinner. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a great one, everybody.